Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. I am trying my hardest to stay hydrated out here. It is so hot. Check this out. Artwork by PJR Studio. And this is actually made by a homie at work. But anyways, we're at an undisclosed location, and today I figured I'd give you a rundown on the whole standalone ECU thing. I know a lot of you guys have asked for more advice videos, so this is for you. So today we're going to be covering the whole standalone thing. Is it worth it? Is it not? And the pros and cons that come with it. This video is not Evo specific. However, obviously the Evo is the car of my choice and what I have experience with. Same thing with the Haltech Elite 2500. That is the ECU of choice that I have purchased and the one I have experience with. But generally speaking, these ECUs tend to do the same thing. So it's a matter of preference, basically. So let's get into it. So is the standalone ECU worth it? I know this sounds like a catch-all answer, but it depends. And in my opinion, I feel like if you have a built engine in a vehicle, I feel like a standalone ECU is a must. And the reason I feel that way is because you need to understand something. When it comes to built engines, there's no timeline on how long they last. And that's something that doesn't get talked about enough. There's no guarantee that this is gonna last 100,000 miles, similar to a stock engine like these cars, for example. I know for a fact, if you do basic bolt-ons or leave them alone, they'll last 200,000 to 300,000 miles. That is typically not the case when it comes to a built engine, and it could last 10,000 miles, it could last 50,000 miles. Keep in mind, when you're building these engines, you're spending thousands and thousands of dollars. In my opinion, you might as well invest in a standalone ECU that can monitor a lot more and has the fail-safes, and it could potentially, I know this is not an investment. Anything in relation to a vehicle is never an investment, but it can potentially save your investment. And that's why I feel like if you have a built engine in your car, a standalone ECU is a must. Additionally to that, guys, you're also able to delete practically all emissions related things if you were to do a standalone ECU. For example, obviously the cat can go without that, but all the EGR stuff and the idle control valve and all that stuff, you're able to delete all that stuff completely with a standalone ECU, and the vehicle will run really good as long as you have a good tuner that knows what they're doing. Now keep in mind, you can add a standalone ECU to a bone stock car. As long as the company provides that specific ECU for that car, you can add it to it. There's no requirement on modifications. However, I don't feel like it's worth the squeeze. If you're adding bolt-ons to the car, you can basically get by with basic bolt-ons and utilizing the stock ECU, particularly in these cars. Now let's talk about the pros and cons of having a standalone ECU. Now this particular car is damn near 20 years old, which means the stock ECU is that old. That's a pretty old computer. So the biggest reason to get a standalone ECU is the features. Now you have all different types of features. Honestly, guys, anything you can think of when it comes to the automotive world, you can do with a standalone ECU. For example, you have flex fuel. Now I need you guys to understand something. There is a difference between dual map and flex fuel, and misconception. So flex fuel means that the car is able to make adjustments on its own to the tune based on the content of ethanol that is in the system. Now dual map just means that you can switch between two different maps. So there's a common misconception that flex fuel and dual map are the same thing. They are not. Now, with these vehicles, you are not able to do flex fuel, actual flex fuel, unless you have a standalone ECU. I know it's a different case when it comes to the Evo 10s. You can do flex fuel on the stock ECU with those, but not with these cars. Then you have other features like rolling anti-lag and drive-by-wire, which is something I'm actually really interested in. I might end up pulling the trigger and going that route. And basically anything that you can think of to include engine swaps and all different kinds of things you can do on a standalone ECU. So the biggest reason to get a standalone ECU is for the features. Additionally to that, like we spoke about earlier, you are able to monitor absolutely everything there is when it comes to the vehicle. And the beauty of it is the ECU acts as a hub for all the information. So the information that you're getting, so for example, if you install gauges, it's coming straight from the ECU, and the ECU is able to make adjustments based on the parameters that were set by the tuner. Now let's talk about fail-safes. Now for this particular car, I have two fail-safes. I have one for oil pressure and one for fuel pressure. So basically, if the vehicle drops below a certain pressure, the tuner was able to set parameters to where the car will shut itself off and potentially save the engine way before you are able to monitor and spot it yourself. I think, in my opinion, this is the most important reason to have a standalone ECU. You've obviously, if you built this engine, you spent a lot of money, and this can potentially save your investment. Now, one of the things that doesn't get talked about enough is the amount of control that you have when installing a standalone ECU. And I'm telling you guys from experience, this car feels like a completely different car with the standalone ECU. It is so much smoother, and it's been a long time since this car has been stock ECU, but I honestly feel like this car right now in its form is smoother than it was with the stock ECU on the stock setup, which is completely mind-blowing. The power delivery is completely changed. The idle is so smooth. It drives so much better. And that's just a testament of how powerful this modification can be. Just because I need you guys to understand, once again, the stock ECU in these cars is damn near 20 years old. Now, when you install a newer, more powerful computer to the car, it's gonna have a large impact. Not to mention the manufacturer's always pushing updates. So that's something obviously you can't get with the stock ECU. So generally speaking, you're gonna continue to have a powerful computer because the manufacturer is always making adjustments and many different things. Now, the last reason you might want to get a standalone ECU is because you're able to make adjustments on the fly. And I get it, you can technically do that with the stock ECU. However, these companies make it so easy to navigate and to monitor everything you need to monitor. I'll speak on Haltech's behalf. The interface that they've created is so easy to read, and everything's right there in front of you. I do have some experience with EvoScan, and I'm here to let you know EvoScan, for example, is very difficult to navigate and mess with. I just think overall they just make it so easy for you. So that is the last reason why you might want to get a standalone ECU. Now let's talk about some of the cons. Now, the biggest con is going to be that this is obviously not cheap. It's not cheap to replace your ECU with a standalone. It's going to cost you anywhere from $1,000 all the way up to damn near 10 grand, depending on what ECU you decide to get and all the options that you order and everything that goes with that. So overall, it's not going to be cheap. This particular setup in mine with the standalone ECU, the harness, the gauges, the wideband controller, and all the sensors was damn near 5 grand, give or take, with taxes and everything. So this is not going to be cheap to do. It's kind of doesn't get talked about enough, and I had to learn the hard way, is making sure you take your car to the right tuner. Now, just because a tuner is good at a certain platform does not mean that tuner is versatile and good at another. So I need you guys to understand that. In my opinion, and something that I've learned from now on, is if that tuner can't prove to you that they are qualified to be working with that platform, I wouldn't take my vehicle there. Whether it's a certified dealer, or they can prove to you with certifications, or maybe just with experience. Maybe you follow them on social media and you've seen the number of cars that they've tuned in that certain platform. Now, the last con when it comes to having a standalone ECU, and this depends on where you live, but if you live in a certain state that has vehicle inspections, chances are you will not pass the inspection with a standalone ECU. The reason for that is they have to plug in to the OBD2 port, and if you do a standalone ECU, obviously that compromises that. So they'll be able to see that you don't have the stock ECU. So that is a reason to not get a standalone ECU. I know you Cali boys, it sucks for you guys because generally speaking, unless you have a hookup, you will not pass inspection with a standalone ECU. All right, guys, I think I pretty much covered everything. If maybe I missed something, go ahead and drop them in the comments, and then maybe I'll throw them in the description. But that's going to cover it for this one. I appreciate you joining me. Let me know what you want to talk about next. If you guys want more advice, I'm here to share the knowledge and my experiences. So I appreciate you joining me. Take it easy, and I'm out. Peace.